Okay, it's probably not my best side, but we're getting started. It's been a few days since I've uploaded a video. Kind of overwhelming at the pace Trump is moving at, and he appears to be making gestures in the right directions, in directions which I applaud. But I don't really think his heart, his soul is into restoring our republic. I hope I'm wrong about that. First of all, I got a new subscriber, and I thank you for joining the ranks of the team here. I don't know where we're going with this. I can tell you this. I've been neglecting to make videos for a little bit because I've been trying to deal with myself and my own inertia, my own lack of forward motion. The rig is what I would call in a broken down state. Parts are supposed to come in today. Hopefully, maybe tomorrow, things will be installed and I'll get some more work done. I'm working on making this rig a little bit more independent, more bulletproof. For sure, the name of the game is prevention when it comes to one of these old CAD engines. They're so expensive to get work done on. The parts are so expensive as well. They're pretty proud of their engines, and they should be. They still make this engine, but they don't make it for RVs anymore. They only make it for off-road heavy use, mining operations and things of that sort. I decided that I just hadn't been reading my Bible enough. So I began reading a few days ago, maybe 3 days ago. I think I'm on my third day, and I'm at Genesis chapter 29, which isn't too bad for 3 days. I'm doing my best to pay attention to the order things are presented in and trying to track down references a bit more. I have gotten to the point where I see contradictions or what appear to be contradictions, and I don't like undermining anyone's faith in the Bible. However, the fact is that the Bibles that we have today have been somewhat sabotaged, and it's real sad. The King of England wasn't a nice man. King James, Charles Dickens, I don't have the evidence. I've never seen the evidence, but a friend of mine tells me that Charles Dickens wasted 4 pages in his introduction explaining the character of King James and how bad it was. Major difference between the Geneva Bible of 20 years earlier and the King James Version. They're both in English, but the main difference is that the King James Version does not mention governments being evil, and the Geneva Bible says governments are evil. I do have a copy of the Geneva Bible coming in with the Apocrypha. I also have another version of the Bible I'm going to be buying after that. My Jewish friend says I should get one of those. It's been translated directly word for word. I don't think she's aware of the Farah Fenton version of the Bible, but apparently this gentleman dedicated himself to learning these languages so he could give us a more accurate translation of the Bible. And some of my friends are saying they're liking that Bible and they read that more than the others. So I want to get a copy of that as well. The rig is kind of a sad state. I didn't pay good attention to my battery banks, and as a result, I have suffered immensely, and it's costing me big. But I'll tell you, learning the lesson to me is bigger yet. You know, I do not like the losses, and I do not mind the losses. But of course, I kick myself for the negligence and the loss. And I can come up with excuses like they were taller, that was a wrong angle, I couldn't see inside of them. I mean, I can come up with that, and I understand that. But anyway, I decided to skip that whole fiasco and go with a battery I should never have to replace again. The state of the country bothers me because I do not think that we can be saved. I just don't think so. I know my friends run around saying Jesus can save anyone. Really? You think Jesus is going to save Bill Gates? You think Jesus is going to save, Henry Kissinger? You think Jesus is going to save the Clintons? I mean, I'm sorry, but in order for there to be justice, then it has to be applied evenly. And please don't get me wrong, I think Heavenly Father can do just what he wants. But the problems at this point are that most of Christianity today doesn't read the Bible, doesn't understand the Bible, doesn't understand the general themes that are underlying in it. And I have to be honest, many times I don't understand it as well. The concept of salvation still mystifies me a bit. And we always have this fight between, grace and works. Are we going to say it's by faith and you can continue doing the same old sins you've done before and you get away with it? I don't think so. I don't think so. I also think that the way this world is designed, things are pretty much fulfilling in themselves. Now, we're coming up with new theories of consciousness, new theories of awareness, and physicists around the planet and just intelligent men are coming up with theories that appear to be converging on the same ideas, and they're in different places. And I love listening to the Italians, and I love listening to the French. And they have totally different perspectives just because that's what their language does for them. It gives them another perspective. The general gist of the discoveries are that we don't exist right here. That we actually exist in a whole nother place. And that we observe ourselves. And I don't understand how it works by a long shot, but I'm going to tell you. Douglas B. Vogt, V-O-G-T, published his theory of multi-point dimensionality quite a while ago, and then after that, 2007, published the book he's going to be most famous for, in my opinion, and he published a third book clarifying his theory beyond that. And then in Missouri, we have a very bright fellow named Langdon, or Langon. I don't know his name very well. He lives in a rural area of Missouri, and let's put it this way. I don't know if he gets out much. He's the same age I am, but his hair is magnificent. He's got a full head of hair. He's got all the color in his hair. He has taken pretty good care of himself. He's also come up with some incredible thinking, and it aligns somewhat with Douglas Vogt's. It's okay. And then the ones that just come up recently, the physicists who are sort of perplexing us all are explaining consciousness and explaining things quite nicely. But the fact is that as we get closer to the end of this Earth age, and I don't know that Douglas Vogt has it right. I don't know if he has it right at all. But as we get closer to the end of the Earth age, we're discovering things. And one of the things we're discovering is that the people that run the planet are just really quite devils, satanic followers. They're not nice people. And the sad thing is the way churchianity's been set up, we're supposed to forgive all of that. We're supposed to ignore that. We're supposed to allow them to continue on with their ongoing genocides in different places. And I think the worst thing is that Americans do not understand the nature of these wars that are going on. The nature of these wars isn't to take Russia down. It's not even to take Iran down. And it's not to take Israel down because they're part of our enemies. It's to take us down. We are the target. That's why they're playing this in such an odd way. And if you look at the functioning of things, if you look at the purpose of things, look at who benefits, where the money goes, and all of that, I think the Asiatics are right. We live in a slave society. It's not free at all. I was just reading about the two boys and how one would serve the other one until one was strong enough to throw his yoke off. And some of the recent prophets haven't been getting things right. But who knows just yet? Signer von Rensinger, the seer at Rendsburg is the proper name. He said in 1948 approximately that the United States was going to be destroyed within a 24-hour period and would never be a superpower again. I think people in this country do not realize that the enemy's been here the whole time, and the enemy's been subverting us the whole time, and the enemy we're dealing with is the same enemy that was harming the German people. And they brought the German people the Weimar Republic and the international bankers, the big bankers. And that's been our biggest problem, is our own corruption. We had a Speaker of the House who agreed to the passing of the Federal Reserve Act, provided he got to become Secretary of State. His last name began with the letter B, as I recall. I don't remember his name. But he was the most unhappy Secretary of State. And I finally got my book. It was sent to me around the horn, so to speak. The people there didn't deliver it in a timely fashion, so it got forwarded up to Alaska and then to me here. And I didn't realize Colonel Prouty had written 2 books, and I consider him the expert on understanding these things. We need to expose the secret team. And in order to get there, they'll do anything. They'll pull a few more dams on us, for one. So what they did in the Carolinas is they pulled, 3 different dams to get that water washing out the way they wanted it? And they probably killed 70,000 souls there, maybe 80,000. You need to understand, that's a genocide that happened inside of our country. And we're going to keep having those until we decide to rule ourselves. And what's the number one thing we can do? We can get rid of all those sons of a bitches in D.C. that have sold us out and keep selling us out. They're all liars and thieves. Congress should not be a paid position any longer. It didn't start that way. It started as a voluntary position. You served your nation. You gave of your time. And when you were no longer able to support yourself, you left that seat and went home. We didn't need term limits then, because a man could only afford to spend high on the hog for so long before he had to go back to work again. But I think right now we've got about 545 treasonous, traitorous rat bastards running the country that have been bought off, and their predecessors were bought off. So I'm pointing my finger at every senator, every congressman, every Supreme Court justice. Your presidents aren't very good either. Teddy Roosevelt was the last halfway decent president. Woodrow Wilson sold this country down the river, and he knew it. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew it was going to come. These men allowed our country to be taken over. I don't know how we handle this. I know how I would handle it, but I wouldn't want to be president. I'd need more power than a president. My buddy says, John, if you or I was president, there'd be a whole lot more dead bodies. And I started to defend myself at that point, go defensive, like, no. And I thought for a second, I says, yeah, you're right. Well, you have got people that have sold this country out and continue to sell this country out. Your senators should come from your state governments. That's the way it originally was. They were never elected directly by the people, and they weren't lifetime politicians at all. The state government, where they came from and to whom they were beholden, could fire them in an instant and recall them home. You can't do that anymore. And that's why the Senate was considered the safeguard of our democracy, safeguard of the republic. But once we did away with the provisions for getting our senators from the state governments, because they were representing the state governments, because it was the state governments that authorized the Constitution, once we did away with that, the republic was gone for sure and for good. It sucks. It really does. What can one do? I just don't know. I mean, this turn the other cheek stuff that was written into our faith is just something else. And one of the last bits of advice from the Messiah was go get a sword. I do not think that we are good enough to be saved. I mean, if I was Yahweh, I would come down here and start painting targets where I wanted the bombs to land at. It's pretty bad. Very few of us understand what happened to the Bill of Rights, what happened to our Constitution. I have a limited understanding, I would call it. But I understand that the 13th Amendment, the real 13th Amendment, was the law of the land. Until Abraham Lincoln overrode it. Of course, they ignored it 1 year after they passed it. It's not in here anyway. I have it on my computer. I got it from the Secretary of State of New Hampshire. You see, it was part of the old constitutions. More proof that it was fully ratified. But they took it away from us and gave us the bar associations. And the bar associations defend the medical doctors. They're all in cahoots together. We have one hell of a horrible system. This is just horrible that Abraham Lincoln got away with what he got away with. Article 13, 2 sections. Section 1. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. I'm not saying we need to make this amendment disappear, but we do. We need to get the real amendment in place. What happened to this? Well, this thing was footnoted in a way that it gave things away so we could sort it out a little bit. But the federal office for the constitutions continue with the hoax and the frauds about all this stuff. So that's a problem. They have screwed up by capitalizing words differently, using different prepositions. It's just no fun. Not at all. We need to restore the original 13th Amendment and get rid of the Bar Association. There was no Bar Association when this country was formed. We didn't have these weird courts that we have today. We had real common courts. We were under the Constitution. And the finalization for this whole thing came with the Social Insurance Act. And if you read what President Woodrow Wilson has said, he admits it's a fraud and it's a crime. And he tells you how hard it is for anybody to figure it out and how much money they're going to make. Just ungodly amounts of money. And so that's exactly what's going on. And you've got one screwed up system. And I'm going to tell you that Adolf Hitler saved his people. He did, for the most part, save his people. However, he was done in at the end by a communist Italian woman who had married one of his generals. And she convinced her husband to send supplies to the wrong places in the Russian front. So that sabotage is what destroyed Germany. They would not have lost otherwise. And at the end of the war, that German general and his Italian communist wife fled to Moscow, where they were received and treated like royalty because they had saved Russia. What did Mr. Hitler do? Herr Hitler. He made pornography illegal. He cleaned up Berlin. He cleaned up the street trades that were going on. He cleaned all of that up, and they burned the books, and they weren't Bibles. Burned the transgender books of Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld. Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld had a PhD and an MD. So he was very educated. And he was very perverted, and he was the guy that did the first sex change operations. Well, at least we consider it civilized, but I'm sure that there were old rituals, which I don't even want to talk about. They're so ugly. Anyway, the main things I want you to understand is that America's been over for quite a while. The most important thing you can do is have the same attitude the Chinese have towards their leadership. Let it rot. That's what the Chinese people are saying. They're not happy with their government either. Our government is much worse than the Chinese government, I think. Ours lies to us all the time. You never get a straight answer. Never a straight answer. Not at all. I would reclaim the original 13th Amendment and declare all subsequent amendments null and void. This is the strategic intervention known as the real 13th Amendment. And while I can take credit for having made this popular in the last 8 to 10 years, it's not fully my idea. The idea came from a Virginian, a statesman, historian, author, Eustace Mullins. Eustace Mullins asserted that the original handwritten notes for the state of Virginia's legislative session, in which they voted in favor of the real 13th Amendment, the original 13th Amendment, which did away with the Bar Association. Yeah. Your three worst professions are psychology, law, and the medical doctors. You need to understand something about the medical doctors. Rockefeller took all of these diseases, they knew the causes of the diseases, but they decided to rename them and name them after the checklist they developed. You know, these symptoms. We're going to treat the symptoms. That's because they don't want to be treating the actual stuff that causes it, because then you might walk away scot-free and not need them anymore. It's a horrible system that we've allowed to develop, and they rule the roost. I used to wonder, why is it in all these places where they have communist purges, red purges, why do they go after the doctors first? And then they go after the people with eyeglasses, the educated people. I think that people around the world could agree to abiding by the terms of the Ten Commandments, the law of life. I think those are good things to embrace. They're wonderful standards to attempt to live fully. And I know there are situations which result in conflicts between those, and you got to choose carefully. But the fact is that looks like it's unfolding just like is described in the Bible. It looks like all the nations are going to gather for war against Israel. The problem is, which Israel? Which Israel is Israel? That little postage stamp of a country that is populated with people from Khazaria, from the Ukraine, basically, from ancient Khazaria. They aren't Israelites. They're Turkish Mongolian stock. They aren't even Israelite stock. And they have no claim to the Middle East. None at all. But they got the rest of us deceived and bamboozled. We need to start enforcing the laws in the Bible. And I know that some of these men have told us very proudly, boastfully, about the structure, who's running the place. And they say that because they know they will never be held accountable. They will never be brought to trial. They think they will never be investigated. I hope our children will rebel against us in a fashion that supports the Ten Commandments, the Book of the Law, that supports the Word of God, and maybe restores the earth to some sanity. You have a weird conglomerate running this thing, and they pretend that they're enemies, but in the top levels in secret, they're working together against you and I. May Yahweh bless.